Well, this evening, as my missive to you a couple days ago mentioned, I was going to break some paradigms, and then I changed the name of it to Pet Peeve Paradigms. I love alliteration. That these 7 items, I figured I just wanted to review. I went back over my teachings in the last 4 or 5 years, and I found that these shifts in biblical thinking have occurred for me over the past, 15 years, let's call them. I didn't always believe these 7 things, and there's more, but these are the significant ones I wanted to share tonight. And you'll see the theme as I proceed. Number 1, Jesus isn't God, but he was a Pharisee. I think I mentioned in my email, Jesus isn't God. He wasn't even the first Christian, but he was a Pharisee, and he is a servant to the Jews. We'll get into that. Junia, female apostle. We'll see a little of that tonight. The creation formula, where everybody thinks it's in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. But that's true. But in other places, the prophets write heaven and earth and the sea. And so many of you know from my teachings in the not too distant past how much the sea means to creationism and our placement in the cosmos beneath the celestial sea. There's a sea above the firmament. You guys know about this. If you haven't, you'll be able to check out some of the research night teachings on TLTF and some of the ones that I've done since October 2017. Number 5, Lucifer hasn't fallen yet. Okay, where is he if he hasn't fallen yet? And Bob, how can you say that? Everybody else says he's already fallen. Well, he hasn't, and we'll see that tonight again. God had help and has help in administering creation, the us sections. Many of you know what that is. We'll go over them quickly, but there's some important things, some very significant things that we'll look at. And then the final one, if we get to it, is the old covenant isn't gone yet and the new covenant isn't here yet, really. So paradigm shifts, what is that? It was in 1962, the philosopher scientist Thomas Kuhn coined the phrase a paradigm shift. And it's an idiom in Western society to indicate a substantial change in the way society thinks regarding particular subjects and lives and so forth. Examples are Copernicus's discovery that the sun did not revolve around the earth, or Edison's invention of the light bulb, even Darwin's theory of evolution. Those are these shifts in thinking and culture, and they alter the world, okay? Theology has its own. They had a big one at the Reformation. The one previous to that shifted much of the thinking, even unto today, as Jesus was declared God a little bit before the Council of Nicaea, but we know from the writings at the Council of Nicaea that he was declared God there. I couldn't find the history of this, and somebody else can help me, I hope. Lucifer fell in the beginning. When did that first start to get taught? And I looked high and low for it. I couldn't find an historical pinpoint. So if some of you guys know it, please help me, because as you know, I teach that he didn't fall. In fact, I would challenge anyone here on the WebEx and anywhere if they know of any angels that have fallen since the beginning. And I'm very particular when it comes to that. There's another paradigm here. When you die, you're not really dead. You go to heaven, and God does not change. That's another, he's immutable. Okay, another such claptrap, as I call it. So we'll start with the first one. Jesus isn't God. He was a Pharisee, and he has become what? Truth is simple, but it's not simplistic. Human nature wants to neatly characterize and label things as good or bad, such as been the case with Sadducees and Pharisees. The gospel record, and you've read them yourselves probably, but you may not have known that they are not just religious groups, but they're political. And you've seen, if you've read the Gospels in any way, that the Lord confronts them both, mostly the Pharisees, and you'll see why. But there are other Pharisees and possibly Sadducees like Nicodemus, and you remember Gamaliel in the book of Acts, teacher of Paul, Joseph of Arimathea. See, I should have made him blue there, but I didn't. Joseph of Arimathea was a Sadducee. Now, let's hit on Jesus Christ is not God first, just for those of you who may or may not know this. God is a spirit, or is spirit, according to John 4:24. Jesus said that. And then he also said those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. And then Luke said she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. God is eternal. He's not born. And then my favorite verse in the Christian scriptures, Paul wrote it, for even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, and he's making the point here that there really are, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, and what's his name? The Trinity. No, it's not. It's the Father, one God, the Father, from whom are all things, and we exist for him, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we exist through him. I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to give you the truth here. So there's another paradigm. The Pharisees were all bad. Although many of the Pharisees, this is a quote from Merrill C. Tenney, although many of the Pharisees were so introspectively intent on the obedience of the law that they often became fussily self-righteous, there were many among them who were truly virtuous and good men. Nicodemus, who has honestly sought out Christ. And then he names Joseph of Arimathea, but you'll see he was a Sadducee. The moral and the spiritual standards of Pharisaism may have tended towards self-righteousness, but they were high in comparison with the average of their day. Why am I telling you this? Because some of them were good and they were righteous and they were trying to, you'll see, they were looking for the kingdom of God. And the politics of Judaism in the first century Palestine, look, everything you read in the Gospels and everything you read in the Bible is religious, okay? It's about Judaism or Christianity, one of the two. Yeah, there's some tidbits on other religions. In the book of Acts, you get to Greece and you get, some of the quotes about other religions. But, for the most part, you're dealing with these, entities, and in this case, Sadducees and Pharisees, and they were actually political entities within Judaism. Sadducees represented priestly families and the aristocracy and the blue bloods, if you will. The duties of religion centered around the temple, and that most of their influence in history was lost by the destruction of the temple, because the Pharisees were more men of the people, and they existed after the temple was destroyed. In fact, there's a guy I had to study in seminary after the Council of Yavne, who's Yohanan ben Zakkai. If you ever want to look at how the Pharisees came back after the destruction of the temple, you can look up at a guy named Yohanan ben Zakkai. But they were more like the modern day Christian fundamentalists, okay? These Pharisees in temperament. They controlled the Sanhedrin, even though they weren't necessarily a majority, and at the time of Jesus, they weren't. We know this from records and history and some other things that you can point to. But even though the temple was destroyed, they were more tied to the law than the temple. So it survived that destruction. A lot of things didn't survive the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, okay? Here, when you ask me for the PDF of this, or if you want to look at it, we're not going to go through this with great intensity, but the Pharisees and Sadducees listed here, you can go through them and why they were, who they were. Remember, there's 5 or 6 at the bottom there. The Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection of the dead, and as I said, they disappeared after the destruction of the temple. They believed in free will, but look on the left side there. The Pharisees believed in free will, but God has foreknowledge of human destiny. This will make some sense to you. They believed in the afterlife, but Sadducees, no afterlife, no angels. love it. How can you read? And let me just say, the Sadducees, I think I have it in here. Yeah, the second one down, recognize only the written word. Literally, they were cemented into the Torah. They wanted those first 5 books. The prophets, they were okay, but it was the Torah that mattered to them. Kind of like the Samaritans, if you will. Anyway, you can read those some other time. You remember Nicodemus. He was a ruler of the Jews, right? And this man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you have come to us as from God as a teacher, for no one can do these signs unless God is with him. The ruler of the Jews means probably part of the Sanhedrin, okay? The Sanhedrin was made up not only of Pharisees and Sadducees, but other leaders. There were priests, there were scribes, there was the high priest, and a lot of vice principals that were under, maybe they were a Pharisee and Sadducee, but the moniker that they had might not have been put forth as politically as a Pharisee or a Sadducee was. Now, John 3 about Nicodemus, but, here's another record about Nicodemus that is kind of important. We'll read through it real quick. John 7, the Pharisees heard the crowd muttering these things about him, Jesus, and the chief priests and the Pharisees sent officers. See how these guys, the chief priests and the Pharisees, sent officers. So there was a militant aspect to the Sanhedrin. Therefore, Jesus said, for a little while longer I am with you, and then I go to him who sent me. You will seek me and you will not find me. And where I am, you cannot come. I'll come up later. The Jews, and many times in the Gospels, the word Jews many times refers to leadership. Won't go into that much tonight, but they said one to another, well, where does this man intend to go that we will not find him? Is he intending to go into the dispersion among Greeks and teach Greeks? Is he? What is this statement you said? You will seek me, you will not find me, and where I'm going, you cannot come. Now, on the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried up, saying, if anyone's thirsty, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture said, from his innermost being will flow rivers of living water. But this he spoke of the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive, for the Spirit was not yet given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. Some of the people, therefore, doesn't say Jews, says some of the people, therefore, when they heard these words going, certainly this guy's a prophet. Others were saying, well, this is the Christ. Still others, surely the Christ can't come from Galilee. That hellhole. Is he? Has not Scripture, is the word hellhole? No, I don't think the word hellhole is in there. Has not the Scripture said that Christ comes from the descendants of David and from Bethlehem in the village where David was? So a division occurred in the crowd because of him. Some of them wanted to seize him, but no one laid hands on him. Jesus had that ability. I love it. The officers, remember the ones that were sent by the chief priests and Pharisees? The officers then came, back to the chief priests and Pharisees and said to him, What? Why did you not bring him? We told you to bring him. The officers answered, never has a man spoken the way he speaks. The Pharisees then said, you've not been also led astray, have you? Don't you love it, pointing fingers? They don't come. They're sitting on their lily thrones back in the Sanhedrin, and they go, this guy's awesome. You guys ought to come. And they go, you've been led astray. You're in his cult. No one of the rulers or Pharisees has believed in him, has he? This is the Sanhedrin talking. Well, actually they had by this time. But this crowd, which does not know the law, is accursed. They're jerks. They're scum. And you're probably scum too, officers. Well, Nicodemus, second time he's mentioned here, he who came before him, being one of them, said to them, hey, folks, our law does not judge a man unless it first hears from him and knows what he is doing, does it? And they answered, you are not also from Galilee, are you, you scourge? Search and see that no prophet arise out of Galilee. I just thought it was interesting. Nicodemus looks a little like Gamaliel here, but it's in the book of John, right? And of course, then we have Joseph of Arimathea. I'm going through this because you want to see the nature of the Sadducee, the nature of of a Pharisee, and then we'll look at Jesus. So it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph. Note the rich man. Remember I said he was probably a Sadducee. They were the aristocracy, the rich. And Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate, asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him, and Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. And then the other record paralleling this, he was a prominent member of the council who was waiting for the kingdom of God. Remember I mentioned that these guys, some of these guys were cool. And he gathered up courage and went before Pilate. So maybe, you got to understand this. Pilate was a Gentile. This was a member of the Jewish council. He just made himself unclean. Go back and read your Jesus Christ, our Passover, and you'll see, what this meant. And at the time of Jesus, the Sanhedrin was made up mostly of Sadducees. But, of course, he didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. And if you read those records, I guess I kept going here in this slide, Luke 23, 49 to 54. He broke a paradigm himself. The man named Joseph in the middle there, a member of the council, was waiting for the kingdom of God, went to Pilate, asked for the body. And if you read the records, Joseph cut a new tomb for Jesus nearby. And of course, he was from Arimathea, so he wasn't going to be buried there. He knew Jesus was going to die. And he knew, if you read the records, he did all the burial things with expectations that Jesus would rise from the dead. So there's another cool guy that, along with Nicodemus, they get together here in John 19. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, secretly, for fear of the Jews, remember he needed to gain courage to go in to see Pilate, asked Pilate, came to take away the body of Jesus. Pilate granted permission, so he came and took away his body. And then Nicodemus, 39, also, who first came to him by night, also came, bringing mixture of myrrh and aloes, which was custom, 100 pounds weight. And they took the body of Jesus, bound it in linen wrappings, spices, burial customs, and so forth. So just remember that these guys, even though Democrats and Republicans in America don't quite make it, they were political parties. And I had a teacher, I'm not sure if I had a teacher that wrote his doctoral thesis on the rise of the Sadducees and Pharisees, so I know a little bit about it. And he was a great man. His name was Dr. William Beeler. I think I have a slide a little bit later about him, but just keep in mind that they were political. So what about Jesus? Big deal. He might have been a Pharisee. I say he was because I truly believe he was. Read John 1, 19 through 28 with me. And this is the record of John. When the Jews sent priests and Levites. So here they go again. The Jews here being the council. And I told you that oftentimes the word Jews means, the leadership. They sent him from Jerusalem to ask him, who the heck are you? And he confessed and denied not, but confessed, I am not the Christ. Who are they talking about? John, the cousin of Jesus. And they asked him then, what then? Are you Elijah? And he said, no, I'm not. Are you that prophet? And he answered, no. Then they said unto him, then who are you? That we may give an answer to them that sent us. We're lackeys. We need to tell them who you are. What sayest thou of yourself? He said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah. That's a great chapter, by the way, in Isaiah. And they which were sent were of the Pharisees. Big deal here, folks. Listen carefully. And they, the Pharisees, asked him, John, and said, why do you baptize then if you're not the Christ or Elijah or that prophet? And John answered them and said, saying, I baptize with water, but there is one standing among you. Who is speaking and who's he answering? Pharisees. There standeth one among you whom you don't even know. He it is who's coming after me, preferred before me, whose shoes latchet I am not worthy to unloose. These things were done in Beth Barbara, beyond the Jordan where John was baptizing. I truly believe that Jesus was for him to confront Pharisees on their level, he had to know how they thought. I'm telling you, if you're going to, answer people, if you're going to answer people's theology, you have to know their theology. You can't just spout your own. You have to have the backstory of how they got theirs. And I'm absolutely convinced that Jesus knew, everything within the religious context of his time before he went out on his own. He was 30, okay? He had some training. He wasn't a carpenter forever. And you could only basically, you had the two schools within the Pharisee party, Hillel and Shammai. Some of you know of that. Two sages of the first century Palestine. Paul was probably a Shammite. His teacher, Gamaliel, was a Hillelite. Shammai was very strict, black and white kind of guy, kind of makes you, many of his followers were found backing from the Zealots. Hillel was more of a listener, more gentle, conciliatory on issues of law and practice. Jesus, most likely Pharisee, was probably of the house of Hillel. If you go to seminaries or schools of religious import, you've got the same factions. You could be a dispensationalist like I am, or you could be a Reformed covenant theologically thinking person like most of Christianity. Here's my little slide, and you can, I will send the PDF to those you want. If you want to get this book, I think I even have this in PDF. Dr. William Beeler, he was my Gamaliel. Jewish society in the period 76 to 40 BC, the social factors contributing to the rise of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Great thing. And I had a couple of other mentors there at the bottom, Edward F. Campbell Jr., Robert Bowling, Arthur Vubis, and Dennis Pardee. In my studies at the University of Chicago Oriental Institute, Vubis was my Syriac teacher. Pardee was my Hebrew teacher. Edward Campbell, I think he's still alive in his 90s. He taught me Hebrew. I did my master's work on the Book of Job in Hebrew. And Robert Bowling was an archaeologist who helped me with my archaeological stuff. You have to have mentors sometimes, and they help you and bring you along. But Beeler, from my Gordon College days, helped on the Sadducees and Pharisees. Okay, so it's no big deal that Jesus might have been a Pharisee. Paul was one, and God gave him or entrusted him with the administration of the secret. So much for all the Pharisees are wicked, folks. Okay, because and let me just say, Paul knew his stuff because he knew his side and he knew their side. Remember when he was brought before people in the book of Acts when they were trying to tear him limb from limb? But perceiving that one group were Sadducees, the other Pharisees, Paul began crying out in the council, I am a Pharisee, a son of the Pharisees. I am on trial for the hope and resurrection of the dead. He got them right where it hurts. And of course, they pulled out their knives and started cutting one another. No, it got him out of the soup. Let's just say that is a cool thing. And by the way, and you know this, he leaned on his Roman citizenship to get him out of the soup as well. So it's just, it's great stuff to know. I'm not going to go through this. You know this thing about Gamaliel, that Paul studied under Gamaliel. And Paul may have been a contemporary of Jesus. They may have even sat in the same classes together. Just think this through a little bit, because he was probably born somewhere between 5 BC and 5 AD. Paul was. They may have been to school. They may have even spoken in discourse together. But remember, 1 Corinthians 15:8 does say, last of all, as to an abortion, Paul says, Jesus appeared to me also. And that, of course, was the vision on the road to Damascus. But he may have stood up, spoken in his classwork, and Paul might have been around saying, oh, who's this guy? He doesn't know what he's thinking. Just think about it. Now, the last thing about Jesus, before we get to the next one about Junia as an apostle, the scriptures in Romans 15:8 says, if you read it in King James, up at the top here, now I say that Jesus was a minister of the circumcision for the truth of God to confirm the promises made unto the fathers. I I have a problem with that because the Greek says what the New American Standard and the New International Version say. Actually, that in Romans, Paul, after the resurrection, after the day of Pentecost, having written other letters before this, Paul says, "For I say Jesus Christ," or Christ, actually has become a servant to the circumcision. And, you know, I say for some baseball players, it's a problem with the curve. And I'll just say this for you guys. For some theologians, they have a problem with the verb, because literally it's the word has become a servant. Now, what does that mean? So what? Big deal, Bob. Well, Paul recognizes that Jesus is still a Jew. He wasn't the first Christian, right? Jesus is still a Jew. He has a priesthood according to the order of Melchizedek, yes, but he is the mediator of what? The new covenant. The new covenant is for Jews. And we'll get into that a little bit. More on Jesus serving the Jews of the future later on in this presentation, because it says that we as Christians are also ministers or servants of the new covenant. Doesn't mean we're in it. Big deal. Big deal. So hold these thoughts, but realize that this problem with the verb has to be overcome. You can't have teachers just saying, well, that's what it says in King James. You got to go behind it sometimes, because one of my teachings a couple of years back, I think I called it, "Is Israel history, or does she have one? Or does she have a future?" Something like that. And yes, she has a future. Read about it in Romans 9 through 11. Read about it here that Jesus became a servant of the circumcision on behalf of the truth of God to confirm the promises given to the fathers. And two of the promises have not been fulfilled: the land and the throne. Okay, land and the throne. Anyway, onward to the next paradigm we need to bust. Junia was a female apostle. So this is number 2. And we're doing pretty well because I've only gone for 25 minutes. I have given you a lot of translations of this Romans 16:7 verse because it matters. And I've given you Greek at the bottom, okay? The red, Junia, is the female word. The blue, Junias, is the male word in Greek/Latin, because these are Latin words. Andronicus and Junius, or Junia, are of note among the apostles, according to some of these translations. The top one says, "who are of note among the apostles." And then the really bad one, ESV, which has no relation to the Greek. They are well known to the apostles. That's not what the Greek says. They're among, you can see a bunch of these other ones who are of note among the apostles, who are even outstanding in my favorite translation, the New American Standard, who are outstanding among the apostles. So we have a classic case of translator bias here as well. People don't like women to have leadership positions when they are talking about the scriptures. So how do we got this? I wanted to give you Robertson's word pictures here, because even here there's some bias. Andronicus and Junius. The first is a Greek name found even in the imperial household. The second name can either be masculine or feminine. And then what do we want to say? Of note, in the middle here, we see the comment is of note, and then correctly Robertson. And this little section here I've copied from Bible Works for any of you who've got it. If you go up to the research section, I thought it would make some sense here, because even Robertson gets among the apostles correct. But here on the bottom, he goes, naturally, this means they were counted among the apostles in the general sense, true of Barnabas, James, brother of Christ, Silas, and others. But it can mean simply that they were famous in the circle of the apostles in a technical sense. So where are you going with this, Bob? We'll see. It's all about accents and attitude. Bruce Metzger, whom he's dead now, but he was famous when I was doing my textual criticism work at the University of Chicago, a leading New Testament textual critic. He was a friend of my mentor, Arthur Vubis, who was the Syriac great at the University of Chicago and Lutheran School of Theology. Bruce Metzger, leading New Testament textual critic, author of a textual commentary on the Greek New Testament, I have it here behind me on my shelves, points out two facts favoring that Junia is a woman's name. First, quote, the female Latin name Junia occurs more than 250 times in the Greek and Latin inscriptions found in Rome alone, whereas the male name is unattested, Junias. Second, Metzger points out that, quote, when Greek manuscripts began to be accented, they weren't when they were first written, remember uncial and cursive, they didn't even have any accents. Scribes wrote the feminine Junia. And it's Junia itself, if it were left alone, I mean, would mean to an English person that it was a woman. What this means is that although the earliest manuscripts of Paul's epistle to the Romans had no accents and so were ambiguous, when the accents began to be inserted, every extant witness construed the name as feminine. There is not a single ancient Greek manuscript, not later ones, not 9th, 10th, and 11th, 12th, and 13th century AD, but ancient Greek manuscripts. There's not one that accents the name as Junias, the male. In effect, then, the interpretation of the name is that of a man. If you interpret it as Junius, it's completely lacking in explicit textual support. And indeed, the name Junius itself is a hypothesis lacking attestation. And this, by the way, you can get on the website Christians for Biblical Equality. I've mentioned it many, many times. CBE is a great website to fix things. How's that? Okay, and this is a case study of translator's bias. I have the PDF if you want it. So here's the accent we're talking about. Just because this is a research night, you got your thinking caps on, make sure you listen carefully. Warning, technical discussion. No, don't hold your ears. Okay, hold them open. The issue of the accenting of a Greek word in the text is as follows. If the Greek word in the text, union in all manuscripts, is written with the accent acute on the penultimate syllable, union, it's on the ni part, union, the name is Junia, a woman's name. If it's accented with a circumflex accent on the final syllable, Ionian, that's the man's name. Okay, there it is for you in black and white. And I think it's pretty clear from history that it's a woman. Here's the end all and be of it. Why is it then so many modern English translations, and I showed it to you, render the name Junius? In addition to the NIV, we see the RSV, Revised Standard Version, TEV, NEB, and JB. Surprisingly, the King James has Junia. It is hard to see any other reason than the translator's bias against the possibility of a woman that could be an apostle, let alone prominent among the apostles. Oh my God, can't say that. The comment in the second edition of the Standard New Testament Greek Lexicon by Bauer, Art Bauer and Gingrich, is typical. Quote, the possibility that this is a woman's name is probably ruled out by context. Really? Really, why? But given that the above evidence, the additional fact that the pairing of the names of Andronicus and Junia may even point to a husband and wife team, you can look at James D.G. Dunn's comment apt, the assumption that the name must be male is a striking indictment of male presumption regarding the character and structure of earliest Christianity. And folks, that paradigm has to be sliced and diced and put back together in a godly fashion. It takes a lot of work to get through some of these very poorly translated passages about women because there was so much bias. And I know John Shainheit, who's done an incredible job in his teachings on women's role in the church. and some other things that he's done in the REV translation, which Rob Woods does a lot of work for. You got to read them. You have to give yourself the opportunity to change about women because, folks, Galatians says there is no longer Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, male nor female, all are one in Christ Jesus. That means something. That might be a coming Zoom conference call, because to tear that verse apart, because some people don't even think it means what I think it means, this paradigm that says, women can't teach, women can't speak, women can't be apostles, women are chattel. Well, they can't be prophets, read Genesis 1:26. God gave them dominion in the beginning. Well, what happened? A lot happened. Okay, that's a paradigm. Okay, next paradigm my pet peeve to break up. Whereas the term heavens and earth are most common dichotomy for all of creation, it is not lost on us that the prophets, plural, used more interesting term, heaven and earth and sea. And I gave you some references here. And the young earth creationists' go-to verse is one of these, Exodus 20:11. We're going to get into this because they want 6 days of creation event window. They want those 6 days to be creation days. They're not. The text cannot support that, but they go to Exodus 20 and try to make it say, well, we'll see. After refusing to see the wrecked nature of creation, they want you to immediately go to Exodus 20:11, the verification of their theory. And we know that verse 2 of Genesis 1, there is, yes, Virginia, there is an earth in verse 2. Genesis 1:2 says, and the earth. Okay, Genesis 1:1, all your kids know this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? Verse 2 says, and the earth. We don't need 6 days to bring it about. If you could read that, I don't even need to teach you that next verb there, which is another verb that they have trouble with. It's the word become. And I think I've shown you this a number of places, or has become, as Arthur Custance has proven in his book Without Form and Void, and another guy that taught me a lot, who lives in Australia, who wrote the Logo software computer program, has translated it, the earth has become without form and void. But the fact that there's an earth in verse 2 may caution you on the paradigm that you need 6 days of creation to make it, okay? And the earth had become without form and void. There was darkness upon the face of the deep, that's water, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Okay, let's go to Exodus and see if we can fix a broken paradigm. This is the verse that young earth creationists want you to read to prove that there were 6 days of creation. Let's read it together. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested on the seventh. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and holiday. Great. It's all done. 6 days, God did it. Well, there's a bunch of things you have to learn if you're going to really research the word. You have to be careful of the original text. In the King James here, which I quote on purpose, the word in is in italics. The word in is not in the text. The word made is the verb asa. It can mean made or done, to do or to make. It's like the Greek word that means the same thing. It's the most common verb around. I don't know if it's the most common verb in Hebrew, but it's one of the ones you learn the first day in Hebrew class. Made, asa, to do or to make. The heavens, the earth, and there's the sea. Okay, now where did the sea come from? Well, it's in verse 2 of Genesis. There's water there. And then God rested on the seventh day. So Bob's translation, and this is very, very good and accurate and close, for 6 days God did or worked on the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that in them is. And then the rest of the verse is great. Wherefore the Lord rested on the Sabbath day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it and made it holy. He worked on it. He did it. He made it. He was doing stuff on those 6 days. And indeed, he did not only work on the heavens and the earth, but he also worked on the sea. Just read them. Verses, is it my next slide? No, it's not. But you have to understand that God worked on the heavens and the earth in those 6 days because he had to fix what had been wrecked in verse 2, right? He separated the waters above the firmament from those that were below the firmament, and I use that term as the celestial sea. You can read it in the Hebrew prophets. They called it the waters above the firmament. Is it Psalm 48? I think it is. That talks about those waters that God had to work on them, and they're above the heaven, above the firmament. There are 3 heavens, not chronologically, as Bullinger and other old earth creationists teach. There are 3 heavens. This is why we have to know this stuff, heaven and earth and sea. In the mind of the ancient Near East prophet, vertically, the highest heaven being the one is where God lives. The celestial sea, it's not called that, but I'm trying to, set up a paradigmatic formula of my own. If you don't want me to use it, just tell me. The waters above the firmament is literally what it's called. They were put in place there on day 2 of the Genesis record because there was a badass dragon trying to disrupt God's work. And, that dragon gets removed. And here's the most quintessential verse, which gives title to my book, No More Sea. In Revelation 21, I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and earth were passed away, and there was no more sea, because, the dragon gets tossed into the lake of fire, and you don't need that separation anymore. I call it the sea of separation as well, because it keeps the dragon occupied. Okay, that's where he lives. He's not allowed to come out until later, and that's in Revelation 12, where he actually leaves of his own accord, and we'll get into some of that a little bit later. Please, I'm going fairly fast, but you really have to read some of these things in context. Those other verses on the heaven, the earth, and the sea are very important. It's not just the heaven and the earth. God created the sea, and then he had to fix it when the dragon, who whipped up the waves of that sea, and then it says God trampled on the backs of the sea, the waves of the sea, in the same way Jesus did on the Sea of Galilee, like Father, like Son. Anyway, next paradigm we need to work on, and I know all of you guys on this conference call know that heaven is not our home, but how do we really know it? Well, here's a good one. Father Peter's speech on Pentecost, June 17th, 28 AD. We can nail that son of a gun. And we can. We did. We know how that works, right, Jeff Gardner? David speaks of Jesus here. I copied a different translation. I was going to copy the New American Standard to show you what was quoted from the Hebrew scriptures. Peter says, "This Jesus God hath raised up," the red in the middle, "whereof we're all witnesses." We got it. "Therefore, being at the right hand of God exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit," Jesus got it. "He," Jesus, "hath shed forth this, which ye now see and hear." So Jesus has what? All control in heaven and earth. Read Jeff Gardner's article in that Palimpsest magazine. "He hath shed forth this," Jesus did, "which ye now see and hear. For David," here's Peter, "is not ascended into heaven, but saith himself, the Lord said to my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand until I make thy foes thy footstool." By revelation. "Therefore let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God hath made that same Jesus whom ye have crucified, both Lord and Christ." Huge. David, patriarch to the Jews, isn't in heaven. Okay? And this is at the book of Acts. This is on Pentecost, right? He's not there yet. Well, then why do people think that other people are up there? And here's the other verse. I don't even know. John talks about the same type of thing. No man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man, which is in heaven. So there's nobody up there but Jesus. It's pretty simple. Jesus taught of heaven where he went. Thus, the heavens become an image of life in God. In this sense, Jesus speaks of a reward in heaven. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. The letter to Hebrews says that Jesus passed through the heavens, right, and entered not into a sanctuary made with hands, a copy of the true one, but into heaven itself. And then here, Jesus talking again in John 14, 1-4, in my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there will you me be also in heaven, right? Didn't say that. And you know the way where I'm going. This is huge. He goes, I'm going I'm going to my Father's house, okay? And he passed through the heavens, and in my Father's house, a lot of places, if it weren't so, I wouldn't have told you. I'm going to prepare an apartment for you. And if I go to prepare the place, I'm coming again. So he's coming out of heaven to receive you to myself. He's talking about Jews, yes, but he's not going back to heaven. Never says that anywhere in the Bible, that when Jesus comes, he goes back. So the dwelling places that he's gone to prepare his disciples a place for aren't going to be in heaven. So why do we continue to say, when you die, you go to heaven? Well, here's a big key, and I guess I stick this in here because it's so important as regards Jesus' return and what he's bringing back, okay? By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed. He obeyed by going out to the place where he was to receive for an inheritance. And look, verse 10, he's looking for a city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. You don't read that in Hebrew scriptures. You read it here by Paul, okay? But it's huge. He's looking for a city. All godly prophets looked for this city. They got a picture from God, okay? And then it says later in here in this same record, for those, let's see, I guess we should read verse 12. Therefore there was born even of one man, and him as good as dead, Abraham, as many descendants as the stars of heaven in number, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. All of these died in faith. Remember, this is 11 where we're listening to the lineup of, what was the guard over the Fantastics? All the lineup of great believers. These died in faith without receiving the promises. Oh my goodness. But having seen them and having welcomed them from a distance, they were given a picture, and having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For those who say these things or such things make it clear that they were seeking a country, not just a city, but a homeland. Not just, remember I told you the things that had not yet been fulfilled, one of them being the land and the other being the throne. So they're seeking a country, a homeland of their own. And indeed, if they had been thinking of that homeland, properly supplied here, I believe, by the NAU, New American Standard, if they had been thinking of that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return. But like Abraham, but as it is, they desired a better one, a better homeland. That is, a heavenly one. Ooh. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he, God, has prepared a city for them. Okay? And it's coming down. You guys know it's coming down. You all know that in 1 Corinthians 13, I believe that which is perfect that is coming is actually the heavenly Jerusalem. And I mean, God is coming back to the planet, not just Jesus, but God's coming back. And, you don't need to have all this heavenly gobbledygook, because why would he come back to the planet but have people up there waiting to come back with him? He doesn't. He gets them up from the dead. And Revelation 21 says so. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first one passed away, no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, also called the heavenly Jerusalem elsewhere, coming down out of heaven from God. Okay? Made ready for the bride, adorned for the husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne, which is what? Now on earth. Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men. He will dwell among them. God is coming back to the planet, not just Jesus. And that's another paradigm that's been totally forgotten. Read 2 Peter 3. The promise of his coming. It's not about Jesus. It's the promise about God coming. He will dwell among them. They shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. Okay. It's heaven is not our home, okay? When we die, we're dead. But how come we get tricked? Because zombies are all over TV, but they're dead. Mummies we used to be on TV for those of us who were younger, older. Saturday morning, right? Boris Karloff. But these guys are dead. But everybody wants them to be alive. Dracula, really dead. Look at the coffin. You gotta love the story. But no, vampires, they're dead too. You don't need the silver stake through the heart or the crucifix to make them melt or have them look in the mirror. Oh my God, fun stories, but he's dead. And Frankenstein is dead, okay? And they stay dead until the resurrection. Well, not these guys, but everybody else stays dead until the resurrections. Okay, next paradigm, Lucifer. I said the word. I tell people I never like the word because it's not in the Hebrew text. It's the shining one, son of the dawn, has not yet fallen. Just read Isaiah 13 and 14 in context. Please, just do yourself a favor. Find a good computer program, and, we're going to do some of it tonight. He falls in the day of the Lord, and I'm going to show you. It's the same guy in Revelation 12. He's there called the dragon, the ancient serpent, who's called the devil and Satan. John gets it right. John the Revelator gets it right. These are all the same dude. It's the shining one, son of the dawn, called Lucifer in a bad translation from Jerome. But in Revelation 12, pardon me, 7 through 10, there was a war in heaven. This is what John the Revelator sees. There's a war in heaven. Michael and his angels waging war against the dragon. Where's the dragon? He's in the celestial sea. What happens here? I can prove that to you if you want to spend a few hours with me in the Hebrew scriptures. The dragon and his angels waged war. Of course they did. They don't like God. And they were not strong enough. How about that? The Most High God had something to do with that because he was what? The Most High. And there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. What happens? The great dragon is thrown down. The serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to earth. There it is, folks. It's future. This is not a, not repetition. Can't think of the word. It's not a recollection of what happened in the dim and distant past. It's not what happened in Genesis 1-2, though a million people want you to believe that. But his angels were thrown down with him. Okay, it really starts way back in Isaiah 11. And I haven't used up 8 million miles of time. I've used up an hour. So we're going to go back to Isaiah 11. And here it is. I'm giving you context. And I've highlighted stuff so we don't have to read everything. Isaiah 11. Where's Lucifer? Isaiah 14. Remember that. Isaiah 11. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse. And some of you are familiar with this. A branch from his roots will bear fruit. Palm fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. Well, who the heck is that? That's Jesus, okay? Spirit of wisdom, understanding, blah, blah, blah. He will strike the earth with a rod of his mouth. When do you know that happened? Psalm 2, book of Revelation. Okay? Context, okay? And then, of course, also in the book of Revelation, the wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat, the calf, young lion, fatling together. A little boy will lead them, okay? Verse 10, in that day, the nations will resort to the root of Jesse. A little bit later on that day, the Lord will again recover a second time with his hand the remnant of his people, okay? I'm giving you a flavor. We're going to Isaiah 12, 1 through 6. Then you will say, on that day, I will give thanks to you, O Lord, O Yahweh, for although you were angry with me, your anger is turned away and you comfort me. This happens after the day of the wrath of God. Behold, God is my salvation. This is good stuff. So look, book of Revelation has good and bad stuff. The book of Revelation, book of Daniel, book of Zechariah, all those things in Ezekiel, there's good stuff and there's bad stuff. There's good stuff and there's bad stuff in the coming day of the Lord. It's not just all 7 years of really bad luck, as I like to call it. There's good stuff, okay? Good stuff, the salvation of the Lord. He has become my salvation. Verse 3, therefore, you will joyously draw water from the springs of salvation. And in that day, you will say, give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his deeds among all the peoples, okay? Not just the Jews, the peoples, plural. Make them remember that his name is exalted. Praise the Lord in song, for he has done excellent things. Let this be known throughout the earth. Cry aloud and shout for joy, O inhabitant of Zion. Substitute Jerusalem, heavenly Jerusalem. For great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. We're talking about Jesus here. All right, we're into 13 already. Wow, we're going fast. This is where the oracle concerning Babylon starts. This is in another place. It's called the taunt song. I think it's maybe good. We'll look at it. This is the bad stuff. All right, we looked at some of the good stuff. Here's some of the bad stuff that happens. What? Verse 6. Well, for the day of the Lord is near. Folks, this and verse 9 are the first two uses in Hebrew scripture of the word the day of the Lord. But what day is it? I already showed you. That day. On that day, this is going to happen. On that day, well, it says, verse 6 here, for the day of the Lord is near. It's always talking about this. Verse 9, behold, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel, with fury and burning anger, to make the land what? A desolation. We know that happens. Blood up to the horse's bridle in the valley of, was it Valley of Decision? Can't remember. Somebody knows. And he will what? Exterminate its sinners from it. How does that happen? Can you exterminate? How does that? Lake of fire, right? The stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. Why? Because the dragon fell and grabbed the stars of God with him, and they also got thrown down. The sun will be dark when it rises. Really? If it rises. When it rises, and the moon will not shed its light. Sound like Joel, right? You've heard the stuff in Joel. The moon will be blood, right? Thus I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will also put an end to the arrogance of the proud. Oh, the proud, Rahab. That's another word for the dragon. And abase the haughtiness of the ruthless. Keep going. I will make mortal man scarcer than pure gold. Why? Because freaking, what, 2/3 of the humans on the planet are dead. I mean, read John Chainhite's book on the Hope. He makes some awesome parallels here. And mankind, then the gold of Ophir. Therefore, I will make the heavens tremble. Sound like a whole lot of shaking going on. The earth will be shaken from its place at the fury of the Lord of hosts. When? In the day of his burning anger. When is that? The day of recompense of our Lord. Isaiah 61, right? Which Jesus wasn't part of at that time. It will be like a hunted gazelle, what? Or sheep with none to gather them. They're running all over, right? They will each turn to his own people, each one flee to his own land. Oh my God, what's happening? They're going to run around with like chickens with their head cut off. And verse 19, we're still with Babylon, right? Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms, the glory of the Chaldeans' pride will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. This is going to be a nasty place. Now, verse 14 comes, the language is continued, when the Lord will have compassion on Jacob. Here we're going for good stuff again. And again, choose Israel. Settle them in their own land. I told you they didn't get it. They didn't get it in 1948 either. They're going to get it when God has compassion on Jacob. And again, choose Israel. When strangers will join them and attach them to the house of Jacob. Okay, I'm slipping into something that I know not totally from my gut, that it didn't happen in 1948. Maybe it began to happen. I don't know. But I'm telling you, I don't think it's the day of the Lord right now, and that's the period we're talking about. I think the day of the Lord begins with the rapture, but that's another whole teaching. The peoples, verse 2, will take them along and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them as an inheritance in the land of the Lord as male servants and feet. They're going to serve Israel, okay? That's what the nations do. Just read it over and over and over again in the Hebrew scriptures. They will take them, their captors, captive, and they will rule over their oppressors. And it will be in the day when the Lord gives you rest from your pain, turmoil, harsh service in which you have been enslaved, that you will take up this taunt. In that day, you're going to take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. And folks, there's dual prophetic issues going on here, both in the day of Hezekiah, about which Isaiah is writing, and the king of Babylon, the future, who is called, follow the bouncing arrow, the star of the morning, son of the dawn, translated Lucifer in many translations. That's who the king of Babylon is, and you guys know it because you've read this context. Because in verse 12 it says, this taunting, Isaiah is taunting, is telling Israel that you're going to take up this taunt that I'm writing right now in 700 BC. How are you fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn, aka the dragon? You've been cut down to earth. Who have weakened the nations. I think we read before, he deceived the nations. And he says that again here. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. Who are the stars of God? Angels. Taught this to you guys a bunch of times. I will sit in the mount of assembly. Which mount? The mount of God in the recesses of the north. North in Scripture is where God lives. He lives on a mountain. He lives on a mountain. He has a council, okay? They sit around and they talk about the things on earth. Read Job 1 and 2 and a bunch of other places. Psalm 82, right? I'm going to ascend above the heights of the clouds. What's above the height of the clouds? The temple where God sits, his throne. Up above the clouds. You can't see it. That's why it's above the clouds. You're on earth. I will make myself like the Most High. Where is he now? He's not there now. He's not a member of the council. I'll tell you, he's in the celestial sea, swimming around and making trouble. Nevertheless, Isaiah writes, taunting him, you will be thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of a pit, for 1,000 years, put in parentheses. Those who see you will gaze on you and they'll go, is this the man who made earth to tremble, who shook kingdoms? I know you know that angels appear as men all over the place in Scripture. Here's another one. Even though he's called the king of Babylon, and there's dual prophecy, you who made, verse 17, the world like a wilderness, yes, he does, overthrew its cities, yes, he does, who do not allow its prisoners to go home. I didn't say it, honey. He's a jerk. All the kingdoms of the nation, kings of the nation lie in glory. They're dead. Each in his own tomb, they're dead. But you have been cast out of your tomb like a rejected branch. He's the exact antithesis to the Samach, the son of Jesse. Clothed with the slain who are pierced with the slain who are pierced with the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a trampled corpse. Read it in the Hebrew. You'll love it. It's just like Ezekiel 28. You will not be united with them in burial because you have ruined your country. You have slain your people. Folks, if you understand let me finish. May the offspring of evildoers not be mentioned forever. Prepare for his sons, whose sons? Son of the dawn, sons, a place for slaughter. Where might that be? Lake of fire. Because of the iniquities of their fathers. They had fathers? They had fathers? They must not arise, mean resurrection, and take possession of the earth and fill the face of the earth or the world with cities. You can't let it happen, folks, and it doesn't. I will rise up. I'm just going to keep reading because I love this. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts. Well, yeah, the armies of God are coming from heaven. Who's going to lead them with a sword? Jesus. Who's going to be part of it? Us. And I will cut off Babylon, from Babylon, name and survivors, offspring and posterity. It's genetics, folks, declares the Lord. I will also make it a possession for the hedgehog. These words are really not real understood, okay? It's not like our hedgehog. And the swamps of water, I will sweep it with the broom of what? Destruction, declares the Lord of hosts. Second time it's used all through here. Here it is again. The Lord of hosts has sworn, saying, surely just as I have intended, so it has happened. And just as I have planned, so it will stand. I have planned it, okay? It's a plan. To break Assyria in my land, and I will trample him on my mountains. Then his yoke will be removed from them. Who's he talking about? Israel. And his burden removed from their shoulder. Look, cities are a big deal. Jerusalem, Zion. It's physical and it's spiritual. Everything that's... Look, Jesus prayed, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The things that we see are shadowed in heaven. And by the way, the kingdom wasn't even there when Jesus was there. Jesus can't wait to see it come with his return when he's king. He's not king yet. Verse 14, 26 through 32, some of my favorites here. Magically, Babylon becomes all the nations, okay? There's dual fulfillment, as I've said. Verse 26, this plan, I told you it was a plan devised against the whole earth. We're still in the New American Standard here. I didn't put it in here. I should have. Okay, the plan devised against the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out. You hate God's hand to be stretched out against you, against all the nations. For the Lord of hosts, there he is again, has planned. Who's going to frustrate it? You? Love that. And as for his stretched out hand, who's going to turn it back? You? No. In the year that King, and now here we go back to history. In the year that King Ahaz died, this oracle came. Do not rejoice, O Philistia, all of you, because the rod that struck you is broken. For from the serpent's root, a viper will come out. I don't know this stuff, guys. I'm just reading it. And its fruit will be a flying serpent. Maybe if you read Michael Heiser, he can explain the flying, flipping sea serpent here. Those who are most helpless will eat. We got good stuff again here, right? The needy will lie down in security. Remember? Wolf and lamb, blah, blah, blah. I will destroy your root with famine, and it will kill off your survivors. Wail, and we're talking about Philistia here. Wail, O gate, cry, O city, melt away, O Philistia. Oh, by the way, I should tell you what Philistia means. Philistia is at opposite poles at this time with Syria. Think of Philistia in Christian terms or in gospel terms as Tyre and Sidon. They were the seacoast area. That's where Philistia was. And then Syria is Damascus. And at this time, they were both trying to get at the king, Hezekiah. So Isaiah writes here, melt away, O Philistia, all of you, for, this is great, smoke comes from the north. There is no straggler in his ranks. We're talking about angels here. I've taught this before. Smoke comes from the north. That's where God lives in the ancient Near East, the Hebrews included. They knew that the Mount of God, Zaphon, which means north, The Mount Zaphon was from whence the angels come. There's a lot of other verses that talk about, and the smoke here, it just represents, I think of Independence Day with the alien ship coming across and the smoke going before it. Just get that mind picture. But in the second part of the verse in parallel here in the Hebrew is, there is no straggler in his ranks, meaning God's army. For then will one answer them. Oh, excuse me. How then will one answer the messengers? It's the angelos in Septuagint, and it's the malach in Hebrew. How are you going to answer the angels of the nations? What are we talking about here? That the Lord has founded Zion, and the afflicted of his people will seek refuge in it. If you've heard me teach this before, it's talking about those angels, the shining one included, who wrecked his own nation. These are the angels who had been given auspices over geographical areas in Deuteronomy 32:8 and did a really bad job of governing. And Psalm 82 talks about how they were going to die like men because, oh, you gods, you sons of God, are going to be smacked around by Messiah. Just read Psalm 82. And here it is again. This is all, it's all in here. And we're all, we're all in with this whole picture of, angels coming from the north. No stragglers. They got their swords out. They're on horses, right? And how are you going to answer these angels of the nations? The Lord has founded Zion. What? Heavenly Jerusalem. That's why the afflicted of his people are going to seek refuge in it. The meek will inherit the earth. That's what it says. Beatitudes. All right. I think this is a one slide fix a paradigm because we're getting, it's getting a little late. God had help in administering creation and in his plans. The us sections, and I gave 3 of them. There may be more, but the 3 of them that stick out to me, God said, let us make man in our image, had help. Lots of angels. They did work for God. They, it says in Job, were rejoicing at creation, okay? I believe they did work, okay? You can believe that God just did all the work and they were laughing with him. Yeah, nice job, God. Oh, yeah, do some more of that. I think they worked. It's other people don't think so, but I do. And then Genesis 3:22. Oh, after the garden, right? Man has become as like one of us, knowing good and evil. God's talking to someone here, folks. And now he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of light and live forever. So he threw him out of the garden, right? Okay, one more us section. Isaiah 6. I love Isaiah 6. Isaiah 6, if you read it in context, is the counsel of God, and they're discussing things together. God, his angels, and guess who else is there by revelation? Isaiah. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who's going to go for us to do stuff, to work, to do things on earth? Then Isaiah, yes, it is Isaiah, said, here am I, send me. God invites the prophets into the counsel of God on various occasions to show them what's going on, what's coming in the future, and gives them tasks on earth. And it mirrors the tasks of the angels that are given stuff to do in heaven. Remember, Paul. Remember Paul was caught away to the third heaven? That's not chronologically, that's vertically, and it's by revelation. He was caught up there. He was harpazo, and he saw everything that John saw, the Revelator, saw in the book of Revelation because he needed to. He wasn't allowed to write about it, but he was shown it, just like Isaiah is being brought into the council. Read the context here. It's awesome. And Isaiah, Elijah raises his hand. Pick me. Oh, pick me. I'll go. I can do it. You can trust me. I can do it. Well, someday, maybe the Lord's going to say, when Isaiah gets his spiritual body and can kick ass and take names, some of that's going to happen, but I don't think it happened then. And of course, those records in Kings where, there's the record of God and his council talking about who's going to go smite this guy. Well, I'll go, one of the angels says. That's another record that needs to be handled with some delicacy, but happens all the time. happens all the time. Even, well, this is enough for God helping and administering his creation. You can mark these things down as you're reading the scriptures, and give yourself a chance to read Isaiah and Jeremiah, because there's a lot of this stuff in there. I used to hate reading those books because they were boring as all hell until I started to learn about the divine counsel and how much power some of these spiritual entities had and were given by God. It's awesome stuff. So what? That's a paradigm we're going to break. Last one, covenants are for Israel, not the church. I quote Jeremiah 31, which is the only place that talks about the new covenant in very specific terms. And it says that I'm going to make the new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah after those days. Here down the bottom, and I have it in black and in blue. Verse 38, behold, the days are coming, sound familiar? When the city will be rebuilt from the Lord, from the tower of Hananel to the corner gate. What else do I give you? Oh, I'm only going to, look, I don't have that much time. I'm not going to make this. I did a whole teaching on the covenants, and I give the references to you later. But I wanted to show you in Hebrews here. I'm not going to read it all, I promised, except for those two that are highlighted. But now he, Jesus, has obtained in the red a more excellent ministry. What ministry has he got? He's become a servant. Same, Here it's the Greek word for a religious ministry, because he's the priest in the order of Melchizedek. But he's got the ministry. I showed you earlier there that he is a minister of the new of the circumcision. But here it says, but now he's obtained a more excellent ministry, by as much as he's also the mediator of the better covenant. Which one is that? The new one, which has been enacted on better promises. Okay? But look at the bottom verse. In the whole context, you read through this and everybody says, we're in the new covenant. The church's New Testament, new covenant. Well, it's not. Because even Paul, when he wrote this, if he knew better, he would have told you, but he didn't. It says, he said, when Jeremiah, said a new covenant, he has made the first one obsolete. Read the rest of the verse. But whatever is becoming, it's a participle, obsolete, and growing old is ready to disappear. What does that mean to you? If you just were honest, it would mean to you that the old covenant isn't even gone yet. Okay? And by default, the new one isn't totally here yet. And I don't know why I gave you this. These are the Christians' covenant thinking. I don't think that this slide helps in any way. But this one does, 2 Corinthians 3. And if you'll go back, here it is. 2 Corinthians 3, the verses 1 through the end, are the most dangerous verses when put in the hands of a covenant theologian, because it says we are servants of a new covenant, right there in the middle, the blue, right? Who has made us adequate to be servants of a new covenant. But it never says anything about it being now. It says in verse 12, we have hope about it being of the glory which is remaining. We have hope about it. So what I'm going to ask you to do tonight is, we're not going to get into this whole covenant thing because it's just too much time. I've given you these 3 research nights to go back and look at. You are not a Jew, the Gentiles, and the covenants in the church, all in late 2013. Maybe I should redo that one because that's just audio. January 15th, the Gentiles, probably also audio, and maybe these are all audio. You can get the PDF and listen to them. I probably really need to redo this. Jesus inaugurated the new covenant in his blood, but then he left the planet. And he's the mediator of it, and he is the servant of the circumcision, but he's not back yet. So, death of a testator. Think about it. But go back if you will, and listen to these 3 audios, and I promise I will teach them in detail in the future. And here's the long and short of it. Those 3, that slide I went through very quickly had these 3 gospel records. And this is the Last Supper. And in the 4th one, this is Paul's remembrance of the Last Supper. Verse 2 Corinthians 3, we are ministers of the new covenant. Hebrews 8, which I showed you, references to Israel. Hebrews 9, Jesus is presently the mediator of that new covenant. Romans 11, there is a future new covenant with Israel. Hebrews 12, Jesus is again the mediator of the new covenant. And Hebrews 7, Jesus has become, verbs again, a guarantee of a better covenant. Okay? Has become. He isn't now. Okay? He has become. Now, what else did I give you? Those are I gave you the meat of it right here. When he said a new covenant, he has made the first obsolete, but whatever is becoming obsolete, growing old, is ready to disappear. I read those things to you. Hebrews 7:22. So much the more also Jesus has become a guarantee or a surety of a better covenant, looking to the future, to the hope. 2 Corinthians 3:11. For if that which is being made useless, old covenant, is through glory, much more that which is remaining is in glory. Look at these translations, and if you go back to some other ones, you'll see the bias towards Reformed theology, and I've posted these in those teachings in the PDF, much more detailed here than you're getting, okay? We need to break this paradigm of we're living in new covenant times, or the kingdom is now, or Jesus is king, or we're spiritual Israel. I'm not going to let these things go unanswered. I'm back at the beginning slide because those other slides are preparation for another teaching. These paradigms, these are pet peeves of mine, and I've taught them in detail, but I need help. I need you guys to bone up on these things and not let people speak wrongly. We are living in the dispensation of the secret. We are not in New Testament, New Covenant times. The New Covenant is for Israel. We are not Israel. So that being said, I think I'll stop the recording and stop sharing. And we've gone over these paradigms. Jesus isn't God. He was a Pharisee, and he has become a servant of the circumcision. Junia is or was a female apostle. You'll meet her in the gathering together. She's of report among the apostles, pretty famous. Heaven and earth and sea, study it, learn it, grow it in your head, because eventually there will be no more sea when the dragon is thrown down and we can be with God again on the planet. Heaven is not our home. We're dead when we die, and no mummies, no vampires, no Frankenstein, and not any, what are the ones nowadays? Zombies, no zombies, no, yeah. Lucifer hasn't fallen yet. He falls in the future, in the day of the Lord. God had help with creation. They're helping us today. Pray for that help. Call for God to send angels all the time. What are they doing up there? Waiting to answer your call, to answer your requests. God will send them. Jesus is in on it. And then, of course, the old covenant isn't gone yet. The new covenant isn't totally here yet. A lot of work to be done on that one.